Let's just get in there. Let's get some knowledge that we can return to the salon ready to conquer all of those color correction challenges that we might have, especially if you're not a color correction specialist. So that, if you've never done a color correction, you're in the right place. If you've done a color correction and you just want some advanced tips, you're in the right place too. This is for everybody. So I see that we got ready to go. I'm ready. Sonya, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Well, let me first say thank you again for joining us here on this webinar. My name is Ryan Weeden. I'm a global ambassador. I'm also CEO and founder of Masters of Balayage. I specialize in balayage education, not color correction. So I'm going to be learning just as much as all of you watching this. All I know how to do is bleach and tone pretty much. I do it pretty well, but I would be afraid too, without a class like this, about going back into the salon without some new tools up my sleeve. Now, Sonya has been in this industry for such a long time. She's got so much knowledge. She's a global ambassador. She's an icon in the industry. I looked up to her when I was in hair school, when I was getting started. And now I get to have this incredible conversation with her. I get to work next to her, and it's just, it's humbling. It really is. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, Sonya, for being here and for showing up. And you're also part of the Ulta Beauty team. The work you do, and I had commented about something you did recently, and you said it's not as easy as it looks. And I think my comment back was, it doesn't look easy at all. So without further ado, let me pass the mic over to Sonya. Go ahead, Sonya. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ryan. And really, this is a fabulous, fabulous opportunity. And I love to educate, and this opportunity of just sharing some of my tips and tricks that I use in the salon often with your audience is an absolute honor. And I just would like to sort of say to the audience that are watching, I come from a very strong background of making it quite simple. So everything I describe to you in the next 45 minutes comes from the way I work. I work on a smarter, not harder. I have a lot of techniques in color that is called minimal placement for maximum effect. And I just believe in making it simple. That's how I learned, so that's how I like to share. So always remember that when I share my techniques. When I work in the salon, I don't have any assistants. I work in the salon, I shampoo all my own clients, and I tear all my own foils. So time is really, really crucial to me. So I don't like to overcomplicate anything. So we all know our clients, maybe some of them have tried things while they're at home, but I've actually asked all of my clients, and I keep them on text and I call them individually, try and not do anything yourself at home. But there comes a point when boredom sets in, and someone wants to buy a box color or try something themselves, and it does not turn out to how they expect. And we're going to be experiencing that as stylists in the salon when we go back into the salon. Another little tip that I've done is I'm going to add on an extra 10 minutes to my clients' consultation when I get back, because I'm not really knowing them how they are now. I knew them before. I've been doing their hair for 20 years, but when they come back into the salon, I don't know what's going on in here. So I have allowed myself extra time. I will be doing that because the consultation is going to be crucial at this point. So one of the big things that we see a lot in color correction is banding, where you have a guest come in and they've maybe got one color to here, and then another color, and another color. The only way to really, really correct hair banding all the way through is going in the opposite way and to do vertical lines. Only vertical lines will negate horizontal banding. That means simplicity. This means highlighting, taking your foil and doing a basic weave and highlighting the hair. Now, there's many different ways to highlight the hair. You could just do a regular highlight with a foil. That creates vertical pieces. You can balayage, like Ryan is so amazing at, because that's vertical pieces. You can also do a little bit of a weave, a baby light, that really, really helps. The one point that does not help is when you do a slice. If you do a one slice of hair on banding, what will happen, you're just going to get the banding show up more and more. The dark, the light, the dark, the light is just going to show up more. So don't do the slicing. Slicing is more difficult. Now, how do you approach a full head of hair? I don't highlight all the hair. I haven't got the time, to be honest. So this sectioning is something I do a lot. I section my client from the temple in a U-shaped section all the way round to the other side. And what I do is I highlight the top. I just put in highlights through there. Now, I may vary that a little bit by adding in 2 side panels of sectioning, and they would be, as, let me turn my mannequin around, they would be a section of about 2 inches wide, and I would possibly include that front section into my top, and I would do that on both sides. So as I do it on this side, I would then do it on the opposite side. So simple sectioning, either temple to temple in a U shape and just highlight the top, or include the sides in to that section, and let's include it up for anyone that's just joining, and that would be added to that top section. So what I would do is I would highlight here, or balayage, and I would just highlight the top. Now, many of you are probably asking, well, what happens to the rest of the hair? Once I put my foils in, and those foils will just be a regular highlight. It is not a foliage. A foliage will still leave that dark banding at the root. It's just a very, very basic. Sometimes we have to get back to the basics, and the basics work really well. I would, in here, I would just go in on the sides and go in with my weaving. And if the hair is thick, I would do a heavy weave. I would do about 50% of the hair. If the hair is finer, I would make it finer. And I would just go in and I use my lightener. Now lightener, I use London powder lightener, multi-powder, and I usually use about 10 volume or 20 volume. I don't like to go too aggressive in the developer. I'm more of a person that would do it once with 10 volume, let it lift up, wash it off, and then tone, and then maybe say to the client, I would like to redo this in another 4 to 6 weeks. So I go slow and often, rather than using 40 volume and compromising the hair and then not seeing that client for a long while. I set it up in my consultation, in the color correction consultation. I explain that it might take once, it might take a second time, and it also might take a third time over a period of a few months. I like to not overpromise. So when those foils are in, and believe me, it's not many. See this top section of hair here? I would only probably put in 15 foils in this top section. I would do them heavier at the front, so I would do a foil, and then I'd do a foil fairly close, and then I would start to spread it out, and get less and less and less. So the most around the hairline. The same here on the side panel. I would either go in this angle around the hairline and do a weave here. Let me get that hair out of the way. You can go in, and I can go in and do a weave in this section at that angle, at a diagonal, like that. Or you can go up and work up that section of hair, starting at the bottom, going 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. So that's those highlights, those pieces of vertical hair will always get rid of banding. Now, when the highlights are in, what about addressing all of the hair in between? So the hair in between would be what I like to do on all this underneath. I usually go in with the darkest level of banding. So let's say, for instance, this is a section of hair that has the banding in. We've got a level 5, a level 7, a level 9, a 5, and so on and so on. I look for the darkest level, and this is where I always use my level finder. I do not eyeball it, because when I've eyeballed it, it sometimes cannot be right. So I go and find out what is the darkest level as the banding. And say, for instance, it's a level 6, let's say, that's the darkest level. What I do, I go in with a level above it, which is a level 7, and in between my bleached or lightened highlights, I would colour the hair with a level 7 all the way through. What that's going to do is it will diffuse those dark bands and add some very light highlights amongst that dark hair, and you will get a variation of highlighted hair with a deeper base. And that's how I would start off. It's not really tedious to do. It's not labor intensive, because you're only foiling up here and around the sides. But I'm going to repeat it because it's really important. You look to see the darkest band that you have. And let's pick another level. The darkest band is a 4. So the darkest area is a 4, and I double check with my level finder. Then what I would put on in between the foils is not a level 4, is the level above it, a level 5. That's because the hair's porous, and when you go, if you put on a level 4, it might have a tendency to look like a level 3 because of the porosity of the hair. So I know I've spoken a lot about that little bit. I've got some other tips. Are there any questions?
Yes, I see some questions here that are pretty much kind of what you're talking about. So one of them is, what if the client has dark hair and doesn't want highlights?
If the client has dark hair and doesn't want highlights, does the client have banding, or she's just got dark hair?
I'm assuming, well, I don't want to assume anything, because I know we're going to talk about how to remove artificial color in case somebody just put a box on their head. We'll talk about that soon. But maybe if they just don't want the look of highlights, but they want to break up, maybe somebody put the wrong root color on and it's a little bit darker.
Okay, so just addressing that question a little bit is, if they didn't want highlights, the only way to negate banding, and we're addressing banding at the moment, where you've got dark, medium, light, dark, medium, light, all the way through, is any form of vertical. If they didn't want actual highlights that they can see, I would go in with baby lights. So I would go in with baby lights in through here and in through the front, and then still do the same process. And when I say baby lights, I mean minuscule hairs, like 15 to 20 hairs in one foil, which is not much, because you've got to diffuse that banding. Now, if the person that asked that question meant what happens if you've got dark hair all over, like it's just dark, shoe polish black or just dark, and you can't see the banding, that is a different process, and they don't want highlights. What I would do there is you need to lighten that hair all over. So that's a little bit into the next subject, but I would like to answer that if that's okay for that person. I don't know if they're giving you a thumbs up, but the way I would do that is by a product. So imagine your client's coming into the salon, she's put on a colour and it's gone way too dark. I would use a product called Weller Colour Renew, and I use Colour Renew a lot. Now, there is another product if you don't have Weller, and it's by Malibu C, and it's called Crystal Gel. So Weller Colouring New and Crystal Gel are made of the same sort of philosophy. They're vitamin C concentrates. So when you put that on all over the hair, it's a gel, you mix it with water, or you mix Colouring New with its activator, and it looks like a thick gel that you would gel your hair back with. That is a colour reducer. And what that does, it reduces the big fat molecules in the hair, the black dye, the dark dye, and it reduces them and it shrinks them. It is not the same as a bleach or a lightener. A bleach and a lightener, like let's say Red Clean Flashlights, the Schwarzkopf lightener, bleach, all of the different ones, the Weller Blonde or Powder lightener, and also the Weller Cream lightener. That the Colouring New is not that. This is an aggressive lightener. It bleaches the pigment out. So I would use Colouring New in that case. You put it on all over, it's a gel, then you put the client under the dryer for about 30 to 40 minutes. Yes, it's time consuming, but it's the baby step to do first. When you take the client out of the dryer, you would then shampoo the hair, and it would then have removed some to most of the artificial dye, but it would not have touched their own virgin hair. That's what I love about Colouring New. The virgin hair stays virgin. It only reduces the colour on the it only reduces the hair colour, the like permanent hair colour. So that's what you could do Colouring New first, then you wash it off, and then you would put on a colour that is the colour, your gold colour. And I know I'm a chatter, but I have to add one little point to that. Colouring New or Malibu C is the same as when you do any lightening or removing colour or reducing colour on hair. Once I remove the Colouring New off, or the Malibu C, and I want to use a colour, let's say I want to use Colour Touch, let's say a level, let's say Colour Touch. I want to use Colour Touch 7/0. That's my target shade. I would not put that colour on it. I would go to the colour above, 8/0. And if you feel 8/0 is too light, you can mix the 7 and the 8 together. But lightening the hair or removing the hair with Colouring New, please remember the cuticle is open, and whatever you put on it, it will go deeper by one level. So that's why I wanted to add that.
That's great advice. Yeah. I have a question here. Will the Colouring New lift the natural base?
The Colouring New does not lift natural hair colour. So it does not. It only works on dye, hair colour, and permanent hair colour. It's actually oxidative colour. So say, for instance, this girl is pink, blue, red, carnival hair, unicorn hair. If I use Colouring New on her, it will not remove direct dye. It only removes oxidative colour, which is Illumina, Coliston Perfect, and sometimes it works on Colour Touch because it's demi-permanent, but not a direct dyes. That's a great question.
Yeah. And also the Malibu C, which did you mention which packet it is?
Malibu C, it's the crystal gel.
The crystal gel. Okay.
It's the old-fashioned crystal gel. You mix it with hot water and you put it on all over, and it will remove a bit of the dye. Now, if I may say, and I've tried both, I've tried them side by side, Malibu C crystal gel is less aggressive than Colouring New. Colouring New is a bit more aggressive. So if I did a half head, it would, colouring you would take out much, much more of the hair that has been dyed, permanent dye, than Malibu C. You would probably need to do 1 or 2 of the Malibu Cs, but they will never ever change the natural hair colour, so virgin hair colour, which I think is great, because so many times clients come in, it's like, clients come in with a new growth, they come in with a new growth, but you want to change the colour, and it's so hard to not get bleach or lightener on that new growth. That's why I love colouring you.
That's amazing. There's a lot of questions here, and I think a lot of them will probably be answered as we keep moving. So I'm going to keep note of all these, and I can already see that we're going to have a part 2 to this to go over some of these more popular questions. But why don't we, at this time, why don't you start to dive into if somebody just grabbed the box and it's came out, you know, they just decided they didn't want to see the roots anymore, so they dropped a level 3 or 4 on their head. And
yes. So if someone had just grabbed a box and just coloured their hair, it would be very, in the different areas of porosity, it can show up very dark, flat, ashy, greeny. That's where I would come in with the colouring you, or the highlights. So the young person asked about if the person didn't want highlights, I would still go in with the colouring you. You could go one or the other. To be honest, guess what I do? My clients come in for advice from me. If I felt highlights was the best thing for my client, I would persuade them to have highlights. I really would. And if they didn't want it to show as stripy highlights, I would just make them finer and more like baby-like. Like my mannequin here. This is a mannequin. So say, for instance, this client here had, see, I've got highlights all the way around the front here, all the way around the front area, and then you've got the darkness. So I think highlights give the illusion to any guest, to any client, that when they pull their hair back, they can have lightness around the face, because usually if they've gone too dark, they hate the darkness. And the area to concentrate on would be around the face framing area, around the front, and putting some highlights there. So I love the idea of highlights. And the reason I prefer color correction in a foil is when you've got a highlight in a foil, you can open the highlight up to see how it's doing. And if there's areas of dark and then amongst your light, so say for instance, it's not lifting up evenly and you've got a dark area here and a dark area here, I can go in with my color, my lightener, my blonde or powder lightener with a higher volume and just address those 2 areas. That's why I like to foil. You can do it with balayage. I love balayage for color correction. The only thing with the balayage, it's hard to go back in areas if it's not lifting up well. That's where foil becomes your friend a lot of times.
I had another great question.
Yes.
This is probably a question that a lot of people have. How do you even charge for a color correction? Are you an hourly person, or are you somebody that charges depending on what you're doing every step of the way?
I don't charge by the hour, but I think it's a really good idea. What I do is my services in the salon, I have very simple pricing. It would become under corrective color or advanced color. So to just give you an idea, I have a partial foil and foil. I don't have anything in between. I don't have a mini foil. I don't have something in between. It falls under one or the other, and I would be the one that would sort of be the one that could control that. Then I have a price, and it's a large price, and it's for corrective color, it's for lightening hair and doing direct dyes. It's something that takes about 2 to 3 hours. and I charge a solid price. So I say to the client, it is this price. It's actually $450 if anyone wanted to know the price. It's $450, and it's a price that doesn't be any more or any less, and it would fall under that. It really would. And I would explain to them that they might need that being done twice. Once this time and once in 2 or 3 weeks. Like an example is a technique that I do here on this mannequin. And if I may, actually, give me one split second. I want to just grab a piece of paper. Give me a second. Sorry to be out of camera. But this is a technique. Sorry, I didn't think I would need this. So I really didn't think I would need it, but it's brought up. So this is a technique that I do called strand lighting. So basically, it's highlights around the face. So it's only face framing highlights. It's not much. And then part 2 of that same technique, I do some foliage and baby lights. So all that is 15 foils, and this mannequin was coloured like that. Even though you can't really see it. It was highlights around the face, 15 foils. Then I did a foliage and a baby light on one side. I did a foliage and a baby light on the other side. So that's 4. I did a foliage and a baby light here. So 6 foils here, 15 around the front, and I charge full head foil for that because it's creative placement at the end of the day. So that's a great question.
Awesome. Okay, great. So where does that leave us now in the next step? So did you already, I've been monitoring a lot of things, so I've been listening, but I've also been going through the chat as well.
Yes.
So
any other questions, Ryan, before I move on?
We could answer questions the entire time here. I also want to make sure we go over the topics that we said we were going to go over, though, too.
Yes.
We're already.
So if I may come back to a little bit of the banding, because personally, I think the horizontal banding is the biggest thing I see in colour correction. If someone's gone dark all over or too dark, sometimes when you really look at the hair and you lift it up like that and you can see in the light, it's usually made up of different bands. So something else I like to do is explain to the client that to have it taken up lighter, you've got to work slowly. A lot of guests in my chair want miracles to happen straight away. And I like to, this is where consultation is key. And I like to explain to them that it's going to take me a couple of times to get to the end result. Because unfortunately, a lot of clients think we can do miracles, and we can only do so much before the hair will drop on the floor. And I have that happen to me all the time. Like even when I do celebrities, I did Sophie Turner's hair, and I turned her from copper to blonde. And Sophie Turner had 11 years of dyeing her hair copper. So that's 11 years of colour, which is a lot of colour. And then to get her blonde, she wanted me to do it in one go. And I said, I couldn't. She said, oh, how long will it take? And she thought I was going to say 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I said, it's going to take me probably a year and 3 months, because I'm realistic. Because I like to do baby steps slowly and not like smash the hair. Because at the end of the day, you've got to understand with your colour that the client is doing, having done to her hair, when she goes home, is she going to use a hot tool that's 450 heat twice a day curling her hair? Because that hot tool will break your hair colour work, and it will break the hair. So that's why I like to go very minimal in my developers. I use pastel developer a lot, which is 6 volume peroxide. I use 10 volume, and I use 20. I very rarely go higher than 20. I use 20 and leave it on for a long time, because I don't want to push the hair too hard, because what is she going to be doing to her hair when she leaves the salon to go home? So I want my work to be kept well. So that's another little tip. So toning, let's talk about toning. So we were addressing the banding. We've got highlights in the hair. We've got highlights down the front because she likes that face framing. So imagine all this is highlighted, all this top section. Now that hair in between, we've already said that I like to go in with the darkest shade, but not the darkest shade, the level above. So we let that develop, we shampoo it off, and then usually we have to tone it. At this point, you've got very light highlights, so they're pretty light. They're usually probably up here because they're in foils. They're usually a depth of like a 10, 9, 10, or even more. And then you've got the darkest shade in between, toning it. I like to tone at a very high level. So I like to tone at a level 9 or 10, and sometimes 8. So 8, 9, or 10, because remember, when colour is on colour, on colour, on colour, it's just going to go darker, darker, darker. So I don't want to get myself back into another colour correction because I toned with a level 6 or I toned with a level 7. So your toner, please, please be careful with your toner. Keep your toner at a lighter level. I know that this is a colour touch chart, so it doesn't have a lot of colours here, but usually at a level 8, 9, or 10. So that's another little tip, because it does, colour on top of colour tends to deepen down. But don't try and attempt doing foils all the way through from back to front, from front to back. So you've got 300, 400 foils, because the inconsistency of the lightening up of the weave in that foil can really be very inconsistent in a colour correction. Because it might be that the dark here, maybe that dark section here, was the colour was left on an hour. And maybe the dark section here, the colour was only left on 30 minutes. So you're playing, it's a bit like roulette. You're gambling a little bit. That's why I usually find when I open up my foil, when my lighter's in and I open up my foil, that there's still inconsistency there. But don't worry if it's really inconsistent in the foil, because at the end of the day, vertical pieces of hair will make it look seamless, and it really sort of blends it in extremely, extremely well. Any questions before?
Yeah, excuse me. Okay, so one question was, okay, how do you decide between whether you're going to use a 10 volume versus a 20 volume when you're trying to highlight through banding?
The way I choose between 10 volume and 20 volume is the aggressiveness of the banding. So let's give an example. Let's say the banding I'm looking at, excuse me, is a level 4, maybe a level 7, a bit of really lightened hair, a level sort of 9, a 4. And so the differences between the 4 and the 7 and the 9, that's quite a lot of difference there. So I want the 4 to lighten up, but I don't want the 7 and the 9 to be too light. So I would probably go in with something like 20, because 20 will lighten the 4, and if I feel the 7 and 9 will take it, I would do 20. If I feel the hair is compromised, so I take the hair, I look at the hair, and I check it. If I feel it's compromised and the level 9 is not feeling that great, I would then do 10 volume. But the big thing that I do that everybody's shocked about, I strand test. I always strand test. So color correction clients, let's play it out in the salon scenario. So Mary here's just sat down and she's got all this banding and she's got a color correction. In my head, before she even knows it, this would be my sectioning. the front section here around the hairline on both sides, and the U shape on top. So that never really changes. But what I do as I start to look at her hair and feel, I said, would you mind that I would just like to mix up a little strand test and do a strand test in your hair? And what I do, I usually do it at the back so they can't see. And I take a tiny section of hair, just one little piece. I put it in a foil, and what I do straight away, 5 to 10 minutes maximum into my consultation, I use my blonde or powder lightener, and I used 40 volume, 40 volume, and I quickly paint that strand there and fold it up, and I carry on doing the consultation. After 5 minutes, I open that up, and that strand test will tell me whether it's 10 volume, 20 volume, whether I could do even 30. But that strand test is my go-to. If I'm not sure, I always strand test. And actually, Ryan, I'll be honest with you, when people come and see me work in the salon, the biggest shock they have, they can't believe how often I strand test. If I don't strand test, this could be my next color correction. So strand testing. And the reason for 40 is I just don't want to mess around. Time is money, and time is very precious to me. So I don't do 10 volume and wait for the foil to lift up. I do 40, and then in that little strand, and yes, I'm going to be honest with a lot of you hairdressers, there may be an area in that tiny, tiny strand test that's gone a little bit compromised, because I've done 40, but I can see it straight away. And then what I do, I take a water spray and I spray it with water and then just wipe the liner off. And it takes seconds, but it can be saving you, really can.
Do you always take it from the same section of hair when you do it?
I'm sorry?
You always take the strand test from the same section of hair, or do you ever alternate different areas of the head?
I only do one. Yes, I don't do one here and another one. I just do one. All it is while I'm talking to Mary, I want to have an understanding of what's going on in her hair. That's all it is. It's a pure understanding of that many years of colour or months of colour. But strand testing is key. And that strand test would probably make me decide, am I using 10 volume, 20 volume, or is it not budging? Mm-hmm. It might not budge, those dark areas. Then I need to go to plan B of doing something like a colour renew all over first. Get that sort of mixture of colours lifted off. Do the colour renew under the dryer. Wash the hair, shampoo it, take it off, very roughly dry, and then start my highlighting. That sometimes can be something that happens, that you have to do colour renew and highlights. Each guest is different, it really is. But colour renew is, for me, a baby step. So sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. The other, if I may add as well, the other thing with colour renew is that if you're changing tone, so let's talk about that. Let's say your client is the depth of a 7, let's just say 6 or 7, either. Let's just say 7. Your client is the depth of a 7, but she put on a colour and it went to orange or to red, let's say it went to red or to orange, and she wants it more like a level 7 caramel. What I would do is use colour renew, because colour renew will remove the tone but not alter the depth too much. So I do colour renew all over, wash that off, and then go in with a level 8 caramel to tone it. Always, always one shade lighter. Always, always in colour correction. So that would be another way of sort of getting the client removed. So if they change the tone and they hate the tone, but they like the depths, you probably don't have to go in with highlights. That would be more of a Malibu C, crystal gel, or Weller colour in you, which I don't have here in my bedroom at home. I don't have at home.
There was another great question too about when you were talking about doing the foils, the vertical foils to combat the horizontal banding. And you talked about how you would do some closer in the front, and then you'd start to stagger them a little bit and go a little bit wider toward the back. Now,
Yes.
is that more to make it a quick service, or wouldn't that create some banding? What would you do with the untouched areas in between the foils that might still have a band?
Okay, yes, and that's actually, I realised then I mustn't have explained that well enough, because that question I sort of answered a little bit, but I'm going to go over it. Great question. So the foils, I would do it closer together at the front. So it's foil, just with like maybe a 1/4 inch in between. Then I would do a 1/2 inch, and then I would do another 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch. So they're not so close together. So they would be close at the front, getting less close together at the back. So I still have my 15 foils, just say. Now, so that's in the placement of the foils. One here, the next one really close, then the next one a bit further away, and then the next one even further away, and so on and so on. It's because of time, and also your aim is to get this looking less bandy. Now, the hair in between that you're not touching, I put colour on. So let me recap. So we've got the hair in foils. We're talking about the hair in between the foils, plus, if I may say, the hair on all of the back area. So it's the hair in between the foils here, plus all scalp to ends, because Sonia's not putting any foils in any of this. I have a short amount of time. So it's all this area. What I do, you pick up the hair and you find the darkest banding in here. So you look at the darkest. So say for instance, it's a 7, it's a 9, it's a 5, it's a 4, and so on. I look for the darkest banding, which would be the 4. And then what I do is I colour all of the hair in between the foils at the front, plus solidly from scalp to ends, all of this is coloured, but I go in with the colour above it. So our darkest level is 4, so I would colour all of this at level 5. Because you can then blend it all in a lot better. I hope that's not too confusing. I wish I had a mannequin I could do for you, but maybe that would be another time, and I would be happy to do that. It's just my lack of things that I have at home during this quarantine. Did that make sense to that person? You know, actually, Ryan, if questions aren't answered, they can always DM me as well, or DM you and you pass them on, whatever works. But I'm happy to answer it until the person's got it.
That's amazing. Yeah, there's a lot of great questions here, and I really want to do another one with you. We could do a whole series of this, because salons are going to be opening
yes
at different times, and we're going to probably, if you don't open your salon for another 2 months or so, cross our fingers it's not that long, but those roots are going to get longer. That gray is going to be harder to touch up if it's 1.5 inches, and then it's got, it's blonde from there below. But yeah, I guess let's just take some more questions right now.
Yeah,
We have a lot of people that, you guys enjoying this? Can we get some yeses and shout outs here for Sonya, how amazing she's doing? You better go to her page too, or her Instagram page, and give her some love on her photos.
Oh, thank you.
How do they find you? They probably already follow you, but in case they don't, how do they find you?
Yes, my Instagram is S for Sonya, S for sugar, O for orange, N for naughty, Y for yellow, A for apple, and Dove, D for dog, O for orange, V for Victor, E for elephant. Sonya Dove, and that is just that it's plain and simple on Instagram and Facebook. But I truly, I answer all questions because that's what feeds me, those questions. So if anyone does have any questions, please ask. And if I've mentioned a product and you want to know what, I don't use any of the products you've mentioned, what happens if I use another product line, I can answer that as well. I just didn't want to go through all the different manufacturers' products. But something I want to mention, Ryan, if it's okay, right?
Sure.
Just a quick second. When we go back into the salon, color correction is sort of a like, oh, color correction. It's sort of that dread. I'm going to turn it around it with my clients, and I'm seeing this as an incredible opportunity for change for my clients. I've been doing the same clients for 20 years, so I know everything about them. I know all the colors I've tried, but I'm wanting them to have a change. And I think they're going to come in and say, Sonya, this really scared me, this virus. I can't believe this happened. You know, I've never wanted my hair blonde, and you said blonde would be great. Let's do it. Let's go for it. And I'm going to get all my clients to change. I want to have fun when I go back. I want to change them up. I want them to be new people because they can't be the same person they were before. I want them to have something new and different. So it's an exciting time. So forget the word color correction because it's true, it is a color correction, but it makes it sound daunting and not very exciting.
Before every big project, even myself, I get a little bit excited, but I'm also nervous because there's so many steps that somebody that might not have as much of experience as you could probably look at ahead and have a pretty good idea of how you're going to achieve your end result. And of course, there might be some missteps along the way or some things that didn't go as planned. But for somebody that doesn't know if it's going to take 2 hours or 12 hours, what advice could you give to somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience on how to approach a potentially, whether or not they call it a color correction or just a big transformation? What advice could you give to somebody so that they're not completely overwhelmed or stressed out throughout the entire process?
First advice is don't be afraid to say no. Really, really and truthfully, I have this happen to me all the time in the salon. Someone comes in and they want virtually the impossible. It's going to take me ages. So you need to sort of stand firm. And there are many times that it's not possible. Also, listen to the client. It's like a two-way thing. It's like, listen to what they're asking for. Also, never forget the shape of the face, the skin color, the eye color. That plays into part as well. So if you're nervous, maybe go to another fellow hairdresser in the salon and ask advice. A lot of times, my consultations, I have an hour for my highlights. A lot of times, my consultation will take me 45 minutes sometimes 30 minutes, and I look at my watch, I run out of time because I can see my next client walking in, and I'm just upfront with my guest, and I say, I'm really, really sorry, we've really come to a very good understanding. I know exactly what I'm going to do, I know what you want, but I don't have the time today because it's taken me 45 minutes for both of us to come to an agreement. Would you mind if I reschedule you? And 90% of the time they say no, they don't mind. Sometimes they're very upset because they've driven 3 hours, 4 hours for their hair. I usually give them some product to take home, and I explain to them, for me to try and do your hair in between the rest of my guests during the day, I really want to do everything I can to just concentrate on just you. So please may I rebook it? And I win them over. You win them over. Be authentic with your clients. Be real. Don't afraid to ask another fellow hairdresser, and do not tackle something you do not know how to approach it. Just say no. Just say no. Because it will be your color correction if you tackle something that you really don't know about. And believe it or not, I have even though Ryan, you say I have a lot of experience, which I do, I get one of these about one a month where I say no. I say no, please get advice, go around and have consultations in other salons with other hairdressers. and then get some information, and then see from that point onwards. Usually that person comes back into me because I had enough oomph to say no to her, and she remembers the first person that said no. Or another hairdresser will say, yes, I can do that in 30 minutes for $20, and it's their nightmare and not yours. So don't be afraid to say no. We're not magicians.
That's so funny because I was taught, and I've been going kind of by the rule of, if a consultation takes longer than 15 minutes, you don't want them. but I think that's it's more based on because you're not agreeing on something. But for you, I already can tell that if it takes 45 minutes, it's because you really have a vision and you want to make sure that you are fully connected and agree every step of the way. Like, this is what it's going to take to get these different, these beautiful, impactful results.
That's correct. And I do not want to touch Mary with anything, not shampooing it, not doing anything until I am 100% in my head sure what I'm doing. If I'm not sure, I don't touch, because as soon as you start touching Mary's hair, it's your responsibility.
That's awesome. I also wanted to let everybody know that I actually have I wasn't thinking about it until now, but if you guys want a special gift, I created 10 ways to have the perfect consultation, as well as 5 ways to wow your clients. It's a downloadable e-guide that it's beautiful. It's magazine quality that my wife put together. She's the head of our branding. So go to theperfectconsult.com. You just, same thing like you did to sign up for this. You just put your name and email in there, and then you'll get a free download. So check it out, theperfectconsult.com, and you'll love it. I hope you love it.
That's amazing. I'm going to go. I'm going to go and look. You can always learn. Always learning.
Well, I guess one last question. Do you charge for consultations?
Yes, I do. I charge $50 if it's just a consultation. Now, if someone comes in and they want just the consultation and they do not want anything done to their hair, I charge $50. If they come into the salon and they booked a cut and blow dry, a color, or a service, any service, it's included into it.
All right. Well, guys, this has been such a cool experience. And I've done these before, but I've actually never really learned so much about color in one quick session. And I know you guys are probably chomping at the bit for more. But I want to hear from you. Please DM me after questions that you might have that you want to hear in upcoming webinars. And I'm going to bring Sonya back if she'll let me. We're going to discuss more of this. But I also want to know like what your biggest challenges are, what fears you're still having even after we've done all of this, because I know color correction, transformation challenges are a real thing. So especially if you don't have the experience. So I want to know what your burning questions are. Don't ask me specifically if you have questions about how to correct something, because that's not my area of specialty. It's not my superpower. It's definitely one of hers. So you can maybe ask her, but I also want to know what we should do for our next one as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We love you guys. Thank you so much, Sonya.
Thank you. Bye. Happy Friday.
Bye, guys.